Welcome to In Contact, a news and public affairs presentation by the Atlanta Association of Black Journalists. And now your host, Angela Robinson.
Good morning. Despite the official separation of church and state in the U.S., faith leaders have played an important role in U.S. politics dating back to the development of our nation, beginning with the writing of the U.S. Constitution to the leadership of the Civil Rights Movement to making countless statements on political topics and candidates. Faith leaders have shaped the course of American politics and the ways that others approach politics. Faith leaders can influence politicians and, in some cases, political outcomes. But how and why, when faith leaders get involved with politics, what are the consequences of their political actions in terms of their professional careers, their congregations, and the American democracy? Joining us, we are honored to have three very vocal faith leaders in relation to national politics. We are proud to welcome the former imam of the Atlanta Masjid of Al-Islam, Pliman El-Amin, and my sister pastor, if I say so myself, the associate pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, home church of one of the nation's most political vocal faith leaders, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We welcome Reverend Natasha Reed Rice, and the senior pastor of Providence Missionary Baptist Church and a longtime friend to this program, Reverend Gerald Durley. Thank you for being with us this morning. This, we like to call it the pulpit and politics. First off, is it a good thing? Is it a working thing? Has it always been an issue and we really don't need to have a discussion because black folks in the church and politics have always existed?
Yeah. Well, from an Islamic perspective, we don't separate any aspect of life. All life is connected. And I think in the African American community, that's, especially for politics and religion, that's true too, that we don't see it as being separate, that it's a necessity for us to look at it as being all connected.
When you say necessity, that's serious. That's in the pocket. That means we can't exist without it. Reverend Reed, you want to weigh in?
Well, there's no politic without voice. So the pulpit, the black church, whether it's organized or it's informal, is a place of voice. So it's a wonderful place to come to hear what it is the needs are, what the voices are saying about the need and the direction in which the politic and the policy should go.
Reverend Durley, should we have it any other way?
No, I agree with my colleagues, is that it is absolutely critical. We've never been able to separate in the cultural, religion, and politics, because politics is the art of trying to find out where we go as a people, and the pulpit has always been an integral part of assisting our people to find their way. So we don't separate that. Even in the larger cultural and the political arena, it might be that, but the black pastor and the imams, we've always had to make those particular statements for the good of the community.
Everybody weigh in. There's a lot of conversation, though, and I will start with your home church, my home church, that when a political leader comes, say to an Ebenezer Baptist Church, that's an endorsement, and a pastor shouldn't be doing that. Or is it really just a means for that political leader to reach a mass of black folks?
I definitely think you can entertain and provide a platform for a politician to come and speak. It's not an endorsement. And I think that it's important that it be a pulpit not just of the preached word, but also of the things that impact us on a daily practical basis. I always say we believe in a God in our tradition that does sit high, but he also looks low, right? A God who numbers the hairs on your head. He's concerned with specific needs. So there's a practicality to the gospel. And it's important that we bring into that conversation the folks that are impacting the policy that impacts the practical lives of the folks in the church.
Weigh in, if you will.
No, I think she's absolutely right. And I think when you look back, the strength of the African American community, not only in America, but certainly on the continent, has been the viability of the African American religious leader in terms of interpreting many of the kinds of concerns from a cultural point of view, from a psychological, certainly from a spiritual point of view. So we've never really separated those particular responsibilities. And I think she was right in the sense of that it's not an endorsement, but we have an obligation, a moral responsibility to enlighten our people by exposing those that come bearing gifts so that we can understand what it is that they're offering us. Far too long we've been buying the beads and the bangles. Now we've got to understand what is in it for us? And the only way that we can understand that is to enlighten our people. That's a moral obligation that we must live up to.
Go ahead.
In our history in the African American community, for years and years, most of our politicians were actually preachers.
Right.
And so we're tied together, and really in a good way, and we see religion as covering every aspect of life. Dr. King he said 2 ways. He saw, on one hand, he was in the work of changing souls so societies would change. But on the other hand, he was involved in changing societies so individual souls would have a chance.
To have a chance, yes, yes.
So that's the work that I see that we have to do. And Dr. Durley, I've known him a long time, and he's out there always on Sundays working on trying to change some souls.
Right.
But all the rest of the time during the week, he's trying to change society so those souls will have a chance.
What does it look like when those souls disagree? Your congregations, your gatherings, where you speak, when you are not endorsing a candidate, but supporting policy, or knowing that you will have a conversation with a political leader. What happens to those souls then?
Well, I think, first of all, 2 things that have made us strong as a people over the years. 2 words that made us strong. One was sacrifice, the other was risk. And when you're not willing to sacrifice, as Dr. King did, and risk his own life and family, then we've lost the power of the pulpit. So we've got to be willing to sacrifice. And that means sacrifice sometimes those that might disagree with you who are sitting in the pews.
Yes.
Oftentimes, leaders are by themselves. And it's a good thing you know that you're in front when people are kicking you from behind. So when you're out there making those statements, and I don't mean to be, it's a strange feeling. We are shepherds. And when you have sheep, shepherds are to guide sheep. And sheep are not just willy-nilly people, but they want to know what is going on. And if we do not do that, then we've abdicated our responsibility, anointed and consecrated by God. So when the people buck against, and they will, then we have an obligation to say, let's look at this. Now you've got autocratic leaders and you've got democratic leaders, even in our religious community. So we have that responsibility. And those that don't, they are not doing the will of God, and particularly for our people in the African American community.
I think, go ahead.
I do want to comment on that because I completely agree. I think the tension is good, right? So if the souls disagree, perhaps that tension forces you to go into a higher level in terms of your own discipline, your soul discipline. There's an awareness, I think, in the church where even those on the outside tend to think it's all emotional, right?
Yeah.
But the Bible says to love the Lord thy God with all thy mind.
Yes.
To me, that means that there needs to be an engagement of the mind with the faith, which means souls will disagree.
Right.
When it comes to politics, when it comes to understandings of faith, when it comes to social transformation. And the goal, I think, of a good religious leader is one that allows there to be tension, allows there to be disagreement, but keeps the eye and the focus on the ultimate goal of God. Not the selfish desire of getting God on my side, but the desire of getting us all together on one accord, and that accord being on God's side.
The will of God, the will of Allah, the will of. Is that how you see it as well?
Yeah, and to know that the will is, God's will is always greater than our will.
Yes.
And so there's always a deeper perspective, a higher perspective to look at. And we are challenged from a national standpoint, the challenge of people, pastors and rabbis and imams, is always the challenge of war and peace. Because we are about peace. This is, our religions are promoting this peace, and nationally we're just living in that kind of time where we don't have peace. And even when you have someone in office that you really love and support, this still becomes an issue because we are in this era, and it's quite erroneous to be in it, in my opinion, that war is just always on the lips of our political leaders.
You bring up a good point. How do you reckon with that in doing the work in the will of God?
And it's difficult for me because as a Muslim, You
Yes.
know, it's this whole thing of terrorism and looking to having to have an enemy. We have to have an enemy, and the enemy has been identified as Muslims, even though it goes under the name of terrorists or Islamists, or now they use a new term they have, Islamist supremacists. You know, so all of these kinds of things, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and you know, there are so many people that are so strong for war, and it's difficult to get elected if you seem to be soft
On war. Right.
So the rhetoric is out there, but we have seen how the rhetoric easily becomes action.
Action, yes, preach.
Yes.
And I was going to say, one of the things that what Imam Clement is talking about is ignorance. Our role is to eradicate and in some degrees lessen the ignorance. Ignorance is always predicated upon fear, and fear of the unknown. The unknown. What are the Muslims doing? What are those black folks doing? What are those women doing? What are those minorities doing? What are those Latinos doing? And so that fear breeds ignorance, and ignorance is very dangerous. So our role has to be lift the veil of ignorance to put in some kind of knowledge, and where knowledge cannot prevail, then we've got to have the faith to know that there is a God that will see us through to break down these barriers of ignorance.
It's just
and
like
that's
you
our role.
said to me before, Reverend Durley, if we could just get education done first. In everything. Lord will make sure everything else comes on board, but we do need, that's what I'm hearing you say.
Seek ye first.
Seek ye first.
Yes.
And we've done, and that fear is what has got all these camps. Look what's going on right now in our own political climate. Everything is fearful of one man, not about the programs, but are fearful of one man. And we've got to alleviate that kind of fear. And that's the role of the pulpit. That's the role of the imam and the rabbi, to alleviate that ignorance, to alleviate that fear, to put faith in there so that we can move ahead for the good of the overall community.
You know, Howard Thurman captured
Howard
it
Thurman.
in the three hounds of hell. The hound of fear, the hound of hate, and then the hound of hypocrisy.
Yes.
Because some of these people, they have this fear and this hate, and they're being hypocritical to what they really even believe. The tenets of America, the Declaration, those truths that we hold to be self-evident, they are being hypocritical to that because of their fear and their hate.
That's right. That's right. And I think, you know, in terms of the responsibility of the pulpit or the podium where you stand, whether you're in a synagogue, a mosque, or a church, is to open up the eyes of the blind, right? To uncover the cloak. And even when you discuss war, it's not necessarily war for justice sake, right? And so we've got to constantly help folks see and discern what it's really a war about, right? And so part of our responsibility is, what is justice, right? The way the world looks at justice is often revenge. But when we talk about let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream, it's the justice that seeks God's will, not the revenge of the individual, not the attempt to avenge a father's failure. Right, and go to war for that reason. But to uncover, what is it that we're fighting for? Right.
So when you look at faith leaders and you come to those conversations with political leaders and they are trying to look at policy, do we look at it from the faith perspective of justice is what I'm hearing when you're talking about not just war, but a war on education and a war on the economics and a war on everything that 9 times out of 9 black folks gonna have to endure first and get the least of and the most of the bad, if you will, the most of the challenge. Is that how you can, as faith leaders, and taking the congregation, the sheep, the flock, to policy? To politics, if you will, in the name of justice, in the name of doing the will of God.
Yeah, I think our biggest challenge is going to be us. Us. Not the people so much, but us. Because we're pulled and torn in so many different directions ourselves. from the politics, from the money that's being offered, from the titles that we put on ourselves. We one minute we're this, the next minute we're that. And so we're confusing our own people for our own level of what fuels America, and that is just greed. And until we begin to go back to some just very, very basic thing, something as simple as people will follow you if you do something as basic as a good hospital visit. And I know that sounds mundane in a technological world, but I think that our people are looking for some kind of hope, some kind of a nurturing, some kind of caring, and then we can, once they see what we as leaders from the pulpit are doing, then they can appreciate what they're saying. But we're saying to them one thing and taking money on the other side. So we've got to introspectively re-examine and reassess where we are if we're to be the kind of people that God created us to be. And and that frightens me more. I'm more afraid of that than some of these political people that I see. I'm more afraid of what's internally occurring to us. And that's why I appreciate being here tonight with these leaders, because we're talking about how do we introspectively look at and become honest with ourselves. Our people are not stupid nor dumb.
That's right.
They can pick out the truth, but they're not seeing that. They're getting confused. One minute somebody is this, and one minute they're that, and we got our stuff mixed up morally and politically. So we have got to now, in 2012, do that.
Are we doing that? Can we do that? Is that happening? Are we still the activists that we say we are in your pulpits and podiums?
Well, to some degree, I think in the African American community, because many of us felt that the dream had been fulfilled with the election of President Barack Hussein Obama. And so a lot of people just got comfortable and waited for him to take care of everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the magic wand now was done.
Yeah.
He was there.
But
he is not a creator.
It doesn't happen like that.
No.
So we have to stay on top of it. We have to stay on top of it. We have to help him when we think that he is being overwhelmed by other influences or by people who are supporting him, and we're not giving enough support so that he can stand firmly on issues that matter to us all. As African Americans, our experience of slavery and discrimination and all of that has given us a genetic awareness of injustice, discrimination, hate, and all these things. We can pick it up. We can just come in a room and pick it up. And so but it's our job to eradicate that and to bring America to its full destiny. And that's our investment. That's the investment we have made, but also the reward that God gives us is to lead that movement to bring America to its full destiny.
And I think you said something, Iman, I think that is very important to point out. We often think of President Barack Obama as the fulfillment of the dream.
Yes.
And I will say, in some instances, he is. But we must understand he is in the tradition of presidents, right? He's not the role of Martin Luther King. He's not the role of the conscience knocking on the door of the White House saying, hey, but you forgot one thing. You forgot this thing and that thing. We still have to play that role.
Right, that's right.
We still have to be the call to conscience.
Absolutely.
And we have to restore the integrity of that call, right? Because we feel as though we've made it, right? We're the Jeffersons moving on up.
Right.
But truth be told, right, we still have a lot of other folks who have not moved up.
You're right, and you bring up a good point of faith leaders. You do have to restore some of this integrity because it's a lot of confusion out there, Reverend Durley.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of things going out there, Please, you understand? There's a lot of things happening,
That's right.
Reverend.
And we've got to hold each other accountable.
Yes.
Accountable.
That's the
Because
key word.
if you believe in the faith that he is holding you accountable or she is holding you accountable, we better get it together.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful when you said about it. Yes, we elected President Obama. I'm happy about that. It's not the end all be all. I heard Mayor Reed say at a Black Journalist Convention a year ago that said that one of the issues is the fact that people need to understand he's an alternative, not the almighty.
Right.
That's right.
And if we could get to that point, then maybe your work might be a little easier and the souls might be saved a little quicker and a better understanding. Does that make sense?
No, that makes a tremendous amount.
When we bring up the president and our mayors, and I think since as a native Atlantan and remembering our first black mayor and so on, even before then, I don't want to date myself too much, but I can always remember, and of course I was always brought up in the church, those black mayors and this black president in their jobs always came back first and foremost and called on their faith leaders
That's right.
to help figure it out. That is still happening. Reverend Durley, maybe you can speak to start us off. I remember the prayer phone calls that were going on when he was senator.
Yeah. Every Friday morning. And this is why it somewhat made us sad when we heard, is he a Christian and all that. And I still say it, and I say it on this show, one of the people that I highly respect is a man named Jeremiah Wright. I'm with Jeremiah every week. And all of the kind of dissension that occurred and how we begin to say, I don't want to be associated with that. But we could pray to this because he led President Barack Obama to a spiritual awareness after what he had gone through in a racist America because he was born to a white woman and a black man, and he understood his African roots and his Christianity. And we started sloughing off. So I think that it was important for the prayers that would go on when Shirley Franklin, even when Bill Campbell, when Maynard, when Andy, all of those individuals, they would all come back. Even President Clinton, when he was in there with, what's her name? I don't know her name. Lewinsky. He had black pastors.
I tried not to say it.
I said,
but it's the truth.
I gotta call
It's the truth.
But he said, I got to come back. And those meetings is basically this: help me to find my shoring and my grounding. And that's what President Obama did. He was not. And on that call,
we all lose our way.
And on that call, incidentally,
that political
there was a very powerful Jewish rabbi from Connecticut. There was a Muslim from Chicago. So it was an eclectic interfaith body of people praying prayers. And on that, and he wouldn't say anything. He would
just receive the prayers.
He would receive the prayers and say thank you. And that was it. So it wasn't anyone converted. And as long as Imam Pleman and I have been together and understand interfaith, he's never tried to convert me to a Muslim. I've never tried to convert him to a Christian. And it's that respect that we have that there is a God that's larger than all of us. And that's where the pulpit comes, because there's a God bigger than America.
You know, when you say the interfaith, you better preach. Well, if we had the usher boy here, we could take up a collection. We better preach. But when to touch on this, when you say with the interfaith and the prayer, and I know the president and I know the mayors have had round tables with faith leaders, in some kind of way, when that happens and when that gets out to congregation and greater good and the beloved community and the black community and so on and so forth, do you find also not just helping that political leader with policy, but helping a community understand the faith?
Yes, without a doubt. And I must mention that locally, Mayor Kasim Reed just recently had a faith
last week.
Breakfast, lunch, I guess. And he said that the rest of this year, he's going to work on human issues, the homeless, the foreclosures, the people out in the streets. He's going to really work on that, and he needs our prayers, but also our advice. I was with C.T. Vivian.
The great Reverend C.T. Vivian.
And he captured this interfaith thing very uniquely. I hadn't thought about it this way, but he said, you know, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, the Jews' emphasis is on justice, the Christian emphasis is on love, the Muslim emphasis is on truth, and we have to have all three of those to really have the full life. And that's what we remind our politicians about is justice. Yes, we want justice, but it needs to have some compassion and love with it. But also we need to understand and have the truth tied on that.
Reverend Rice, when all that comes together, when good policy and good faith, and I put faith and justice together, when all of that happens and the word gets out, then what happens to our community?
Transformation.
Thank you. Preach on that.
Transformation. I mean, ultimately, that's the goal. When we look at things and see what they're not and know what they can be, that's the hope, right? And then we have the truth that comes in and enters in and helps to discern and decipher away the things that are being put out to distract. Because one of the things we see in the political conversation is distraction, right? You have the nonsense of Rush Limbaugh, distraction. You have the nonsense of people trying to tie faith to something that has nothing to do with faith, distraction. But when you can get the truth, the justice, and the love in one place, when you can have the voice of many heard, right? You can have true transformation. And that's when we truly see the justice rolling down.
And I want to say in our community, and if who's ever listening, you in the pew, you have an obligation to hold us accountable. We are not the all in all. Some of us have been to school, some of us have been past school, some of us have been called by Sprint. But we have a that's the truth. Some of the things we hear coming out of the mouths of people are atrocious. So you have the right, when we talk about truth, to understand truth and love, as Jesus Christ, as Allah talked about it, they have responsibility, and then and only then can we be strengthened. When we look back at slaves did not swallow everything. They challenged Nat Turner. They challenged Denmark Vesey. And so when they came out, they were strong. So we have to go back to that. They challenged Martin Luther King.
Yes.
Even though we see him as an icon now, Martin was challenged on many occasions. And it's that creative tension that made the movement strong. It was strong-willed individuals that made, and we've got to go back to that rather than saying, well, that's the Pope, and that's the bishop, and that's the apostle, and all these titles. You know, next thing you know, who knows? We might start calling each other king or something. You don't need all this stuff.
Is that when we? Go ahead and preach it.
We got to stay away from all that. And
is that when we get too caught up in political power and lose our space?
And lose our space, yes.
And Doc took in all this advice and the support and everything. But when it came to certain things, such as like Vietnam, he didn't care what the criticisms were. He knew that this was the right thing to do. To stand against Vietnam, it just was not right.
Exactly.
And he stood, and he was very unpopular here in Atlanta.
That's right.
Some preacher up in Chicago changed the front door of his church because when they renamed Martin Luther King, the street Martin Luther King, he didn't want his address to be that.
The National Baptists and the Progressive Baptists came out because of the political, social issues that were very paramount at that time. I mean, when you make stand, women are equal in our ministry. And when you make that statement, women have the same right. There was a breakdown between that middle wall of partition between male and female and Jew and gender. So when you find this ignorance that's coming out of our own pulpit, we've got to hold ourselves accountable if we're to be the pulpiteers that God called us to be.
To be the leaders, the shepherds, but not the people who are trying to see where everybody's going.
No, exactly.
Get out front.
Which is the call for integrity again. So it's also the call for consistency, because that's what you saw with Dr. King. His consistency didn't waver by the social, what gained the greatest applause.
And what did he sacrifice? Remember I said sacrifice and risk? He risked it all and left 4 small children and sacrificed his life. Most of us don't want to sacrifice our home, our paycheck, we don't want to sacrifice that. And I'm not saying people should give up everything, but there has to be some virtue.
Gandhi said one of the great evils, one of the 7 evils was religion without sacrifice.
I'm going to have to say amen and close it out. And Lord knows I hate to stop good faith leaders from preaching. It's so much more. But we thank you for this understanding and hopes of a transformation. And keep doing what you're doing in your faith places. We thank you so much. It's an honor to have you with us. Thank you so much. As always, we thank you for joining us. We're in contact with you. You stay in contact with us. We'll see you the next time.